We're back with new episodes of the Iron Skillet Podcast, and this week we have photographer and videographer Luke Strege from St. Louis, Missouri. Luke got into video work by editing Call of Duty highlights back in high school. As he got a little older towards the end of high school, he went to college to pursue a degree in finance. At the time, he felt like this was the safest and most stable option, but upon graduation during the first few months at his corporate job, he quickly realized that wasn't how he wanted to spend the rest of his life. He offered to shoot a wedding video as a gift for one of his co-workers, and this re-sparked his love for storytelling and videography. He started to build a business on the side, and recently was able to leave his day job and go full-time as a photographer and videographer. In this episode, Luke talks about how he built some genuine relationships with other creators on social media, and recently, during a trip to LA, he reached out to see if they could use a hand. This landed him on the set of Machine Gun Kelly's MTV VMA performance shooting behind the scenes. Luke talks with us about his love for storytelling, how to control your own chaos, and the importance of being yourself. If you want to connect with Luke on social, follow him on Instagram at Luke Strege. Let's get into this week's episode of the Iron Skillet Podcast. What's up, guys? We're back with another episode of the Iron Skillet Podcast. I'm Shatora. I got my man Travis in the building running the boards. Got Brandon over there in the corner. And my guy Luke, he's a videographer and photographer from the St. Louis area. Is that where you're from originally?
Yep.
St. Louis, Missouri. Super excited to have you, man. How are you doing?
No, I'm doing good. I'm excited to join you guys. Appreciate the invite. And yeah, going well.
So we usually start, a little bit getting into like what your childhood was like, because some people have been doing videography forever. Some people find it at different times in their life. So what was like childhood like growing up? Were you always into creative stuff? Did you have other interests?
Yeah. So yeah, childhood, I grew up around music a lot. So my parents were music teachers, and so I was always hearing piano in the house, singing, and so I grew up playing pretty much a decent amount of instruments, but more so like just bass guitar I stuck with for most of my life. And then apart from that, I was always into video games and movies. And so it was one specific series or trilogy in particular that like affected like the creativity aspect of me, was Lord of the Rings. So that I remember watching that when I was younger, like way back in the day, and it was just like, wow, someone can create visuals that look like this. And so that pushed me to like look a bit more into editing. And so when I was in 8th grade, so I'm 24, just for a bit of reference for people listening. So when I was in 8th grade, I was big into video games, and I then discovered YouTube. And so from that, I had friends record their video game clips, mostly like Call of Duty or like first person type shooter stuff, and I would put them into montages with music. And so I fell in love with the creative process of doing that, and I did that like all through high school, so like for 4 or 5 years, and then kind of came to a spot where I decided to go to school for finance and not really pursue something that was creative, because it was the safe, like a safe option.
Yeah.
And people around me kind of recommended against doing like the creative aspect of it, but here we are today. And I can get more into that, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'd love to. I feel like that's a lot of so many people experience that, and I think that finding your path into creativity, like a lot of people can relate to that. So did you you went to college for finance?
Yeah, so I went to college for finance, undergrad, and then I got through that and kind of put like my creative aspect in terms of like editing, video, and anything like camera related to the side. And then I got out of college, and I always would run around with a GoPro when I was in college, but I didn't really ever think of any of the footage. And I just looked at it one day and I was like, oh, this is really cool. And I started to put together videos. And so that's kind of what led me to picking back up a camera and using my editing skills and passion for that to turn into videos and storytelling. And then that's where I kind of was like, maybe I can create some movies or like things with my friends. And so I started documenting just life in general. And I got into it from there. Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
What I think's really cool, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you started editing videos first before shooting them?
Yes. Yep. And it was
cool.
Yeah, thank you. And that was video games. So that was like even not
Right.
from like actual cameras.
Right.
So.
Well, the fact that you got, your feet wet with the editing before you even, picked up the camera and started, shooting footage, I think that's really cool. And it's a different route than most creatives like you guys take.
Yeah, definitely. I know.
Go ahead. My bad.
No, you're good. I was just gonna real quick on like the editing aspect. Yeah, I know. So for me, I always thought of it from when I picked up a camera. I always thought from an editing perspective. So that I think that really shifted and shaped the way that I shot my footage. So
That makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to hear this tipping point, because did you start, so when you graduated college, did you get a job in finance? Like, did you graduate, get a job, and just start working in that area and then shift to videography? And if that's true, I want to hear the tipping point of like being like, okay, I'm leaving this job and I'm going to start to try to build a business of my own.
Right. Yeah, I did exactly that. So I got an internship when I was grateful to get an internship in college that led to a full-time offer. And so right out of college, I had a finance job, and I was there for about 4 months before it was like the honeymoon phase of, hey, you're not going back to college after this summer.
Yeah.
Or after like the start of the year, like that internship-ish time frame. And then it kind of hit me like, well, this is what I'm going to be potentially doing for the rest of my life. And it just wasn't like the corporate environment, corporate world wasn't for me or isn't for me. And so I had a coworker who was getting married, and she didn't have a videographer. And this was about 7 months into working this full-time job. And so I offered to shoot her wedding for like just as a gift.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to get into it. I was like, maybe there's something here. So I had bought just like a beginner camera again, dipping my toes back into it. And so I went and shot the wedding, had no clue what I was doing. I watched a bunch of wedding videos on YouTube, looked up tutorials, kind of like, maybe I can teach myself how to do this before I go.
Yeah.
But realized that you just learn as you go and experience it. But after that, I kind of just fell in love with that process, because I filmed everything, came back, sat down at my computer, and I was like, I can tell this story in so many ways. And so I decided that I was just going to do it like in a documentary style, because that's something that I just love is documentaries. And after I did that and watched back what I'd created, I was like, wow, there's something here with this. And then like a month passes, and then someone reached out and was like, hey, can you shoot our wedding? And then I was like, wait, I can actually make money with this. Or make like where it could potentially be my career instead of what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was kind of like it kind of clicked the technical side of me, because I was trained mathematically and things like that in college to think about numbers and all that finance stuff.
Yeah.
And so it kind of clicked when I was like, wait, I can actually do this and make money showing up with a camera and me doing it on my own, and people will pay me. And so from there, it was just like game over in my head. I was like, this is what I want to do.
It's a no-brainer.
And it wasn't no-brainer. It wasn't necessarily just weddings, but just like the aspect in general of I could create my own business and things like that. So,
well, congrats to you, because that's brave. I know that I think that the creator in all of us, it speaks to, I think we've all felt that way, trying to see how you can build your life around the thing that you love. So, and not everybody's as courageous to just go ahead and take the leap. So that's awesome that you did that. first of all, I know that you do a lot of different things. I know you have your wedding business. It looks like you also work with some artists and do a bunch of different stuff. But from a wedding standpoint, like that first, let's say 6 months to a year, like you leave your job and you're trying to build this business. Did you go through any adversity during that time? And like, if you did, how did you push through that stuff? Because I think sometimes it's hard to see how you go from like one client to consistent, you know what I mean, back-to-back work.
Definitely raising your prices and all that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So like for me, I'm actually still until October actually. So you're catching me to where I'm about to make like the jump full time.
Yeah.
So I decided that I was just gonna stay in my corporate job and do both, which is also a different animal, like a different type of beast.
Oh yeah, that's tough.
So for like about 2 years I've been doing that. But touching on how do you go from like getting, because it still is, you're still starting a business and still doing your own thing, to where at first I was like really timid and I would approach conversations in like a questioning way, like with an inflection in my voice and all that with clients. So it would come off maybe I wasn't as confident, but it was just because asking what you're worth when you don't exactly know what that is at that point is pretty scary. I know for myself and maybe people listening. And so what I did was I just continued to create for like on that wedding side. I shot it took about 4 weddings before I realized this is what I would be happy getting paid going to do this. And then just like trying not to compare myself to people around me in the industry, and then just slowly like I was pretty aggressive with my pricing, and I'm happy to get into all that stuff because I know that's always a question that people typically have on the creative side, like how do you charge more money? But
definitely.
But I was the type of person who just like dives full in, and so I kind of got like the progress is what hooked me.
Yeah.
So just continuing to see that improvement and then being relentless and consistent with any feedback that I would receive from like my peers or anything like that, taking it constructively and not getting like defensive if they said anything like that. So
that's awesome, man.
Of course, I'm sure you were, afraid to hear a no just by whether you were high-balling or low-balling, and you don't want to take something under what you feel you're worth. But, knowing all the time and the effort you got to put into the shoot, the editing, I'm sure as you went on, the price went up and you kind of got a feel for what it was going to be worth.
Yes. Yep. 100%.
I think
exactly.
I will say for anybody that's listening that's trying to get into this, I would say go look at Luke's website because your website is great.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, it tells your story. Like, you talk about how you got into doing what you're doing now, and then, like, the example videos that you have. It's, like, the little thoughtful things. Like, there's, like, a few sentences about each wedding that's up there, which I think is something that stands out. Like, when I went to his website, I was like, wow, this is, like, really unique. I've never seen anything like this. So I just thought that was awesome. I thought that was really well put together.
That.
Yeah, definitely.
You mentioned that about his wedding pics and everything. I thought that was really cool about his Instagram, how he would literally tell the story of, he would just have a picture of a guy and be like, all right, this is so-and-so, and this is why it inspires me. And I thought that was really cool, and it really brought the pictures that you've taken to life, putting a story to it.
Yeah, and I appreciate that.
Think that. Go ahead.
No, just like building on those comments and like my thought process on like why I did that. So like for me, I love stories and I love storytelling, and that's where like the passion lies, and just the medium of being able to do it through, whether it's like pictures or videos or editing, is just like the byproduct of that, which I find is awesome. And the captions and like those little sentences that I say for each of those couples is me being as authentic as I can be, because at the end of the day, and which was it took a lot, and it's still something I work at each day, to be like unapologetically yourself. So being like genuine and all that, because there's so many people out there who will just do what they think will make people happy,
right,
and all that. But if you stick to what you believe and like who you are as a creator or a storyteller, eventually and over time, people will see that and do that.
You can see like it's very authentic.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate it. Yeah.
This man's going places.
Well, I think that's a great leeway, because that's one of the things I had on here was to talk about storytelling, because I had seen in your bio that was one of the things, like learning how to take an idea and turn it into a story and then turn that into a piece. And I think sometimes as a videographer, you can get caught up in the technical piece of things so much that you overlook the story part of it. And I think that's even like something shot on an iPhone with a good story, it can be 10 times better than like something on a Red camera with no story.
Yes.
So I kind of wanted to hear your thoughts on that, and just kind of a little bit about maybe the intention that you take as you approach a project to try to make sure that you have those things together before you go out and shoot it.
Yeah, definitely. I know, and you're spot on with that, because I've seen things shot on iPhones or even like older cameras from like 20, 30 years ago that are still phenomenal today. And it's like that story that drives it. But I was grateful and blessed to have people in my circle from early on, like when I was like, hey, this is something that I want to do, that kind of steered me away from not focusing on that technical gear aspect. Because it's easy for people who enjoy whatever it is to get excited about like the new thing, like the shiny object, and be like, maybe this will help me, but I really just want it because it looks cool or something like that. And that's easier to focus on in the short term over getting or developing your skills and developing your voice. And that's something that like we do on a daily basis, just as we evolve in who we are. And just, I think, is that, I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's great. I feel like we're reiterating some of the stuff that we all know, but and we've all been caught up in that. I need this piece of gear. Like right now, I'm convincing myself I need a stabilizer. Like I've told myself, like I need a gimbal, but do I really need it?
Yes, you do. Duh.
So
if the tool gets a certain job done, then yes.
Yeah,
for sure.
exactly, man.
That's a great way to gauge it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I know one of the things we wanted to touch on, and this might lead into some of the stuff that Brandon has, is I saw on your YouTube that you've done a good bit of traveling.
Yes.
And you've seen a lot of different places. And I know that, did you have some stuff about specific trips that you wanted to ask on there, or?
I got a whole page to rattle off things.
Yeah.
One thing I noticed, there was a picture on your Instagram of the Blue Ridge Mountains.
Yes.
And was that the Blue Ridge in Virginia?
Yes, it was.
It is literally like 20 minutes down the road from us.
where we live.
That's wild.
And I clicked the location. I'm like, bro, that's literally right down 7. And then I noticed you were in D.C. right around the same time. What brought you to VA?
Yeah, so one of my best friends, who also is a wedding filmmaker, lives in the the Virginia, D.C. area. And I was out there helping shoot a wedding with her and her husband. And they were like, hey, do you want to go check out mountains near our home? And I was like, heck yeah, I do. And so they took me on like a little hike. And then DC is something that I'd always wanted to visit when I was little. And so getting to see like the monuments and a bit more about the historical aspect of our country was pretty cool. So work brought me out there with weddings.
Of course.
That's awesome, man.
Work.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the big Europe trip. What was it like?
Yes.
And what was that? Like what made you want to travel, or was it, spur of the moment, or was it planned, or was it work?
No, it was that was not work. That was a personal trip, and it was semi-planned. So it was my best friend from grade school, and I kind of like reconnecting after college and things like that. And there were $400 round trip tickets from Chicago. So I'm like a 5-hour drive from where I'm at to Barcelona, Spain.
Wow.
And I called him up and I was like, "Hey, do you want to go on a trip?" And he said, "Where?" And he had never been out of the country before. And so I told him, and so he bought a passport and he got it set up. And so we went on this 8-day trip. And initially we were just going to stay in Barcelona. And then on our way to the airport, so I had studied abroad for a month when I was in undergrad in Prague, Czech Republic, in one of my favorite cities in the world. And that's kind of like where my love for traveling started. And I just got the travel bug and knew it was something that I couldn't really let go anytime. And so when we were going there, I knew a few people who lived over in Europe, and one of them lived in Switzerland, and they were like, "Hey, come visit us." And so since we didn't really have a plan, I asked my friend, and his name was also Luke. But I asked my friend, I was like, "Hey, would you want to?" And he was like, "Yeah, sure, why not?" And so it turned into just like a pretty relaxing trip into traveling all over Europe. Because then from Switzerland, it snowballed into going to Prague because he wanted to see where I studied. And then we did like a day trip to a monastery near Barcelona called Montserrat, which was beautiful. And so that trip was me wanting to document life that was outside of work, because a lot of the times now when I do travel, which I'm super grateful to be able to do and get paid for, but a lot of the times that I do travel, it's very focused on whatever client is paying me to be there.
Right.
And then this was more of like just a trip to create memories, and I wanted to showcase that in that film.
That's awesome.
It was cool.
What's it like experiencing a culture outside of the U.S.? Like, is it humbling, or is it kind of weird, or you feel out of place, or how'd you take it all in?
Yeah, it's a little bit of everything that what you just said. I think my favorite thing is the culture aspect of it, because if you are intentional about immersing yourself in that different culture, or wherever you are, even different parts of the U.S., like from the Midwest to the West Coast, or Midwest to the East Coast, we live semi-different lives in terms of culture and ideals and stuff like that. But just immersing yourself in that and embracing it to experience it, it kind of just opened for myself, like shattered my perspective of what I thought the world was, and kind of opens up your mind to how big we are, like where we are is, and how much room there is for different people and growth to happen. So
it's beautiful.
Well, that's awesome. Well, that kind of leads me into one of my next pieces. Like, so one thing that I noticed as well is like you do a really good job of creating content for yourself, just like your YouTube, your Instagram. And I think sometimes if you're a full-time creative, you can get so caught up in just doing like work for clients that you forget to actually build stuff for yourself. So I thought that you did a great job with that, and how, like I said, how I came across your page was the piece that you did on Sam, and I scrolled through and I saw that you had multiple pieces like that with different types of artists, not even just videographers, but street photographers and other different types of people. I kind of wanted to know what inspired that idea, and just like, I'm sure that a lot of positive things have come out of that, just like sitting down with people and talking. So I just wanted to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, definitely. One of my good mentors and friends, his name is Zach Kravitz. He told me that as I get further into it, like you said, you're going to get super swamped, or there's going to be periods of time where you're only focused on client work or fulfilling someone else's vision, and creating for yourself and remembering like where you came from, in that creative aspect is super important. And so for me, loving documentaries and loving just telling life as it happens and getting to know people outside of creativeness and outside of using my camera. I love getting to know people empathetically and understanding where they come from and just learning their perspective on life. And so with that series, I was talking with a friend one day and he was like, well, why don't you just create short stories on people's lives? Because like with podcasts right now, what we're doing is talking a bit about my experiences, having this conversation with you and your experiences, and creating like that full story, to where I wanted to do that in that short form. Because in today's world, with our attention span so short, typically, at least for myself, I was like, I have to be able to tell a story in a minute. And so, and it's something that I want to do down the line and get paid for as well. Mm-hmm. But I'm doing it from a passion standpoint now, because as you create this work and you put it out, potential clients are coming across your page, whether you know it or not. And then also just doing something that you love. And eventually someone's going to be like, hey, can you make this for me? And it's going to be coming from that place of passion and forming like your way and what you want to do.
That's an awesome perspective.
I think that's really cool, because not only do you're telling someone else's story, but you're also challenging yourself to tell it in a minute, because you're right. We consume so much content that, a minute might be all you get from somebody before they, scroll to the next piece. I think that's really cool.
Thank you.
I see like a lot of the pieces that you have, they are like, they're very intentional, but they're short, like 30 seconds to 1 minute, and the titles are like pretty epic, you know what I mean? Like one of them, like Searching for the Answer, is like very intentional, you know what I mean? What was your thought process around that? Because I see that you have like multiple things like that, and it's really enticing visually, and I just kind of wanted to pick your brain about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so with my feed on Instagram, and that's where, so I have the Luke Strege, which is my name, personal brand Instagram, and then I have a separate that we can dive into in a bit for just weddings. So, but meaning so shooting what you want to show. Mm-hmm. But going back into that question that you had, is the idea behind that is it kind of forces me to create for myself a bit using my personal brand, because the way my posts are will be either two types of for each row. So there's 3 rows on Instagram, or 3 columns per row. Mm-hmm. On Instagram. And so for each row I have 2 pictures, either whether it's a picture or like a GIF or something related to that, and a video that goes along with it. And that was something that I've done for like 7 or 8 months now. Mm-hmm. And it's forced me personally to create with intention like that. And so it kind of, I'll be like, what do I have to post next week? Because I'll post like every 2 to 3 days, and if I don't have anything, it puts me in that like pressure cooker to come up with some sort of idea to shoot. And so like the Searching for the Answer one, there was an opportunity for myself and some friends to shoot in a studio, and I was like, how can I use this like for my own personal stuff, but then also for any client work that I had to do there. And so just having fun with it mostly.
Yeah.
And then being intentional about it.
I love those. I think that they're so...
Thank you.
Yeah.
That kind of brings me into one of the things I wanted to talk about. And one thing that we always seem to keep bringing up is making the most of the opportunity that you're given. And with us as performers, I always preach, all right, if you're performing, I like to have a videographer and a photographer there. So I'm literally making the most of the opportunity. And it sounds like you got a pretty good concept on it. You're there for the work for the client, and you're also trying to figure out ways to get your own content.
Yes.
Elaborate a little bit on how you make the most of these opportunities.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll give like a specific story example that happened recently that just even blew my mind in ways, in terms of like what opportunity came from it. So the biggest thing for me with that, like making the most of it, is making a client happy, and then being able to use what you're already budgeting for or what you're getting paid to do for your own for your own personal stuff extra after you fulfill whatever that client wants. Because sometimes like you won't have extra opportunity to film it extra or take any extra pictures, but those times that you do, you typically will know. And so just being like, hey, this is an opportunity for me to shoot more of like my own self and be like my own authentic self. And something that recently happened on a trip, and it was a traveling trip, is I had a wedding client that decided to elope because of everything going on with COVID. They had a large wedding plan for this year that ended up having to be postponed till next year. And they decided that they wanted to elope to Laguna Beach, California. And so I came out so we shifted plans and went to do that. And while I was out in California, I know a few people out there, but then also just people I follow on Instagram and people that I developed relationships with through social media. And an opportunity came up for me to get onto a music video set, because music is something that I'm super passionate about, and my direction in terms of long-term goals with like touring and just doing more of that stuff. And so I was intentional with just reaching out to anybody I could, and the opportunity came up for me to go on a set, and I didn't really know who was going to show up or what it was for, but I was like, I'm in and I'm there, and the opportunity that came from it was pretty incredible. So
that's awesome.
That was turning like that paid travel trip and using I had 1 day buffer into an opportunity for something for myself.
That is inspiring in itself. Is it top secret what music video that was?
No, I posted content on it. So it was a music video for MGK and the VMAs.
Ooh,
and so that was pretty.
okay.
So I was able to do behind the scenes on that.
So that, hold on, wait a minute, hold on.
That was on my list.
Okay, I know we were going to get to that, but wait a minute. You're telling me that this was that wasn't even planned. It just so happened that you landed that from, just being the right place, right time?
Exactly.
That's crazy. That's wild.
Yeah, that is wild.
And I what's up?
It's like being persistent too.
Yeah.
'Cause you were like, I'm out here. I gotta find something to do.
It looked very intentional. Like, oh man, they paid him to be there. He's there for a reason. But like, you just stumbled on this, and that is crazy.
Right. Yeah. And because I had built a relationship for like a number of months with a DP, or for people listening, like a cinematographer or videographer who shoots music videos. And I'd been consistent and persistent with just being authentic and developing. Like every so often I'd be like, hey, love your work, or hey, love this, love what you did here, or just saying hi, dropping in like DMs and being genuine. And when the time came for when I noticed that there was something going on that weekend that I was going to be there, it worked out to where they invited me on set to do behind the scenes. So
That's incredible.
What was that?
Yeah.
I'm a huge Machine Gun Kelly fan. So
I love it. Me too.
Yeah.
So
I saw that and I was like, wow. But just beyond that, what was it like being on something of that magnitude? Like the VMAs, I imagine it's a huge production. There's a lot of moving pieces. Like, just kind of, what was that like? And did it like excite anything inside of you from a creative standpoint? Like other things you might want to do?
Yes, it did. It basically, music is something that I knew that I wanted to get more into, and how to get there is always a question. Like, how do you get to the next step? And like being on a set like that, where there was a large team, where everybody had a specific purpose why they were there. There was a handful of photographers, and then the rest of the crew who did like lighting, audio, setting up props, construction stuff. There was a mural artist. So just a lot of moving pieces, like you said, and it kind of like opened my eyes to you don't have to be a one-man band or one-woman band to get success, right? Because they're all there for their specific purpose, and they're there because they're good at what they do and they're good people. So it kind of just showed me that there's so much opportunity out there with what we do.
That's awesome.
That is crazy. I'm still blown. Like, man, talk about making the most of an opportunity. You won 2020 with that, dude.
Yeah, for sure. No, I did. And then when you're on set, being intentional about creating connections while you're there.
Definitely.
And so I left with a handful of connections that I didn't have before I got to that set that day. So
that's awesome. And that's what I always preach to, is networking, meeting new people, putting yourself in those positions to do that. And you definitely hit a home run on that.
100%.
Thank you.
There's another person that I want to talk to you about, and so I saw that you shot some things for Lewis House.
Yes.
I'm a huge fan. I listen to his School of Greatness podcast. He drops stuff like almost every single day, and he's a super inspirational person. But I wanted to know, first of all, I heard about the Summit of Greatness. I wanted to know a little bit about what it was like, because it sounded like it would have been an amazing event to be at, and a little bit about how that opportunity or connection came about.
Yeah, definitely. So that was September of 2019 is when I worked with Lewis, and then I love Lewis. He's a great guy. So that came about from kind of like that networking connection type stuff, where I decided that at that point in the mid 2019 area, I was about 7 months into pursuing me doing video work and storytelling professionally. And I was like, it's about time for me to invest a little bit more in myself outside of camera gear or any type of tool. More so like course or education. And so a person that I had followed for a long time, and I mentioned his name earlier, Zach Kravitz, he came out with his first, it was called a filmmaking course, and I decided I trusted his vision because I watched his story, kind of being connected with that. So I took his course, and it wasn't necessarily like, oh, I took this course and everything changed for me. It's more so taking that environment and the education from that perspective and applying it to yourself and applying it your own way, and then also growing the relationships within that. And so I had been intentional I wanted to, on my vision board for that year, in the coming years, I wanted to work with Lewis. And Zach had worked with Lewis in the past. And so I was intentional with telling Zach, hey, I want to work with Lewis someday, and here are some of the steps that I'm going to take to get there. And so I just kind of continued to work, and then I reached out to Lewis, I reached out to his team, and about over that 3 or 4 months, I started to slowly chip away at them coming, not being annoying, but
just
being persistent. And then there was an opportunity for Lewis to he needed a personal videographer to shoot behind the scenes for the summit. And then he reached out to Zach and asked Zach, because Zach had done it in the past, asked Zach for a recommendation. And so it kind of just being vocal about what you want and putting it out there into the world, and then you doing the work and taking action, kind of is how it worked itself out to where I got to that. And so the summit itself was that 3-day event, and it was really cool to see how one person's because it's all from a podcast, the School of Greatness, and it was really awesome to see how something like this platform, or this type of platform, can affect people's lives, because it for sure does. And just listening to stories and what you guys are doing is awesome, where it developed that community, and he was able to host this 3-day event that happens annually now when events are held again. And it was just it was a surreal experience. And that was my first hey, you're being recognized. This is my inner thought process, hey, you're finally making it in a way. Because that was my first thing outside of client work, where it was something that aligned with my passion with storytelling to do. So
I don't want to overlook this. I just want you to reiterate it because I feel like people don't do this, but you mentioned having a step-by-step plan. You had a goal, and you put steps into motion that you needed to accomplish to reach that goal. And I feel like people overlook that, and they think they could just jump straight to the goal.
Mm-hmm.
Reiterate that one time for the listeners.
Yep.
And tell them that whole process.
Yeah, definitely. So like for Lewis specifically, I had been a longtime listener of his School of Greatness podcasts and kind of like felt connected to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, hey, I would love to work for this guy someday. And so I put it on, like, one of my dreams
Mm-hmm.
was like, he's a dream client. And so I started being intentional, and it was scary at first because it was uncomfortable for me to share myself, like, with others, like being like my true feelings. And I was like, I started to reach out to my network and vocalize, hey, I want to work with this person.
Mm-hmm.
And those people had more experience than me. And they were like, hey, maybe if you do this, one day you'll get there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it was just taking that advice, but then also just continuing to focus on yourself and focus on what you like, your craft, and just continuing to develop that skill gets you there. And there's not really like, that's the thing, because like you said, like with the step-by-step plan, like there's steps we can take, and then also there's no specific roadmap on how to get there, right? And there's no specific timeline, because for some it'll happen super fast, and then maybe what you think is super fast is not fast for others, and things like that. So, but just staying true to who you are and taking those, like, just trusting the process is the biggest thing.
That's awesome. Trusting the process.
That was
That's what you got to do, people. Trust it.
Yeah, there's a lot of really good advice right there for sure.
Oh, man. I'm telling you. This guy, he's going places. I'm telling you.
A lot of people will like have a goal, and then like if it doesn't happen in a week, they're like, oh, move on. So another being persistent. Like
he set the goal, he vocalized it with creatives and around. He told them what he wanted, and then stayed persistent with it. And look at you, it happened, and that's awesome, man.
It did. Thank you. And I think so.
You gotta go.
A big thing for cool. So a big thing for me is like when I started to see that happen, like in me, and like started to. I think the biggest thing is just like believing that it will happen and believing in yourself. But then the coolest thing for me is that those things happen for me, but then letting and helping out my peers and like my network see them have those wins. And that just gets me super hyped up, because seeing them follow what they want to do and seeing what, like, where they want to be is like gets me hyped, and to see them succeed. So
paying it forward.
It can happen for everyone. Yep.
No, that's awesome.
I still got a couple more things. You got?
Yeah, I got a lot of stuff. So
all right, you go ahead. I probably don't have as much as you, but
I definitely wanted to talk a little bit about. I saw the series that you started, and it seemed like it was right as everything was shutting down. And you started this little, like, you were getting out in front of a camera and sharing little different ideas and pieces, and I thought some of that stuff was super important, like about leaning into your network and kind of how to manage some of the anxiety and fear and stuff that everybody in the world was experiencing. So I thought that was really awesome, and I kind of wanted to get your take on how that affected you as a videographer that goes out and shoots live events. You know what I mean? What was that time period like? What did you do to try to stay positive and continue to make progress?
Man, no, that's a great question, because like there was that limbo type period where we didn't really know what was going on, right? And that's when I had always had a goal to do a podcast or some sort of medium where I'm speaking. And I got challenged by one of my close friends to like put myself out there more, because a lot of my work at that time on my page was just my work, and it wasn't like, apart from the captions, but it wasn't me being like the face of, hey, this is Luke.
Yeah.
It was just like, hey, this is what I can do. Look at me, right? And so that series was I thought about short little, once again, short form type paragraphs or content that I could put out and be my genuine self. And so I wrote down a list of topics that I thought that people would get value from, and have that value added into their life, and being as vulnerable as I could be in front of the camera, because what we do as videographers, photographers, or anybody who's capturing anything, even audio with like singing, is that everybody has some sort of insecurity in their life or anxiety or anything that like they may doubt themselves, like imposter syndrome or anything. And me being behind the camera, I was super comfortable capturing others, but I wasn't comfortable being that spotlighted person. And so that series was me being vulnerable and being like even more of like myself, like, hey, I'm gonna try to connect with as many people as I can in a genuine way. So
that's another thing that I like to preach, is stepping out of our comfort zone, like you did, getting in front of the camera, something that you're not used to doing. But I feel we grow as creatives when we do step out of our comfort zone and do things like that. And I think you carried yourself very well.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I think also one thing, Luke, that's great about that content and just the way that you produce content for your Instagram is you're building a really deep connection with your audience, as opposed to just like, here's a clip of a really cool car, here's a clip of something, like, you know what I mean? Sharing things like that, people are going to continue to come back, you know what I mean, and support you in everything that you do. So I think that's something people can think about as they're thinking about how to make content for their Instagram or for their social media, for sure. Was that a weird, I mean, were you still working your other job during that time? Like, was that just a weird time for you, like when the whole lockdown happened?
Yes. Yep. And so I was still able to work that job, and then thankfully virtually. And so making that shift to where everything I was doing was working from home was also like a different aspect for me, because I was used to going somewhere and mentally checking in and then mentally checking out when I left a building. And so just having that space it was the most time, or this period whole time has been the most like in my thoughts I've been able to have in a long time, just because we're all in the same spot for most of the past few months, or almost like 5-6 months now. And that's good and bad, because it depends on what type of thoughts you let in, right? Because there's some, not everything's good times, but you go through those maybe less great times to get to the more like yourself, right? So like that's something that I went through when I was there.
There was a quote in those videos that you did that kind of comes right into that. You said, control your own chaos. You want to elaborate on that one? Because it sounds like we're kind of leading right into it.
Yes, sir. Yep. So I love that quote, and something that I revisit a lot, because it came from a Netflix show called The Witcher, and if anybody is listening has seen it, I'm sure you'll agree with me that it's great. And if you don't like it, that's okay. But if you haven't seen it, maybe to check it out. But basically, there was a big theme with the Witchers, that they were taught to control their chaos, because with what we do in life, and I took it in the perspective of you can control your energy, you control your emotion, because that's one thing that we always do personally have control of, even though sometimes it's harder to do than others, because we get heated or some sort of emotion comes up, upset, happy, energetic, and just knowing when to let your energy out, meaning like protecting yourself and protecting like what goes around inside your world, is something that's been huge for me, because there are times where even if it's something great, you probably like you have to control how excited you get, so that when you come down from that, from the endorphins and all that stuff, you don't go to like a low spot, right? So it's all a balance, and which is difficult to get at times.
I love the way he put it, you know, controlling your own chaos and checking your own emotions, and because, you know, you see all these things in the media and you get worked up and this and that, but controlling yourself and the things around you that are in your control. I thought that was really cool how you elaborated on it.
I feel like I have the stuff I have. I want to kind of go back and touch briefly on working with artists. So I've seen you work with a couple artists like Machine Gun Kelly, and I think did you do some like behind the scenes for like Blau for the
Blau, who's an EDM artist, and then I've been the main creative like videographer, photographer for an artist called Drama, who love great people, and they're based in Chicago.
So my first question was, how do you approach creating for an artist versus like a wedding? It's completely different. You know what I mean? Like, how does
It is completely different.
How's your thought process for that?
Yeah. So my thought process there is kind of like everybody wants to be, when I say everybody, like every human, no matter if they're a celebrity, just people that you would consider regular people, like who were having a conversation or things like that, everybody wants to just be treated authentically, right? And so something that I learned pretty early on, and this was actually something that Lewis taught me, like because when I first went out to him, I hadn't worked with many other like high caliber or people who were looked at in the public eye with a lot of like ideas who they were outside of their personal life. And so something that he taught me was that at the end of the day, we're all just the same because we're human. And so just treating everybody like that, and how like you would want to be treated, like those basic sayings that we were potentially taught when we were growing up and things like that hold true. So like approaching the artist thing is that every artist has a different personality. All of us have different personalities. And so just understanding and being able to pick up on the dynamics of how they work is important. And so, because I'm a super, like, let's get it done, let's go, this time, but some people don't work well like that, right? And so just being able to adjust and be adaptable to working with how those artists are is big. And then just being friends with them outside of not always having a camera in their face. So
that's that's awesome.
Yeah.
I want to touch more on the music aspect as well. You said you got into bass a lot. Did you ever join a rock band or anything like that?
I was in jazz bands, so I got pretty heavy into jazz. And so I never got into a rock band. Was always on my list, but I have yet to join a rock band. Maybe in the future.
Well, you're never too old for that. I do listen to rock.
No, you're not.
Another thing, I seen you covered a couple shows or performances, and I seen you covered a show for the Plain White Tees.
Yes. Yep.
And I seen you listened to them growing up. How did that feel, being able to cover a band who listened to or looked up to growing up? How was that experience?
It was surreal, because for me, music is something that I can listen to a specific song, and it immediately takes me back to wherever I first heard it, or whatever point in life I was at when I was listening to that. And so to me, there's a lot of emotion around the music. And so like with the Plain White Tees, I just remember always listening to it like full blast and singing along. And so when I was able to meet them and professionally work with them, it was just a surreal experience to where two passions aligned of those artists are passionate about music and spreading their music with the world, and then being able to capture that. It was just an awesome experience.
Did you have to control the chaos?
Yes, I definitely did have to control. Yeah, you definitely do, because like I let myself get super excited like on my way there, but then as soon there's like a zone that I have to like put myself in whenever I'm in those environments, because I'm just like the regular fan who wants to go wild and be like, oh my gosh, I love you, right? Or like, I love your work. But then it's just like you said, controlling it to where you can like shift into that zone of
professional.
All right, this is just what I'm here to do. So. And
then you freak out when you're in the car on the ride home.
Like, that was crazy.
Yeah. You're like, that just happened. No, yeah. So
that's awesome. That's awesome.
Thank you.
That is really dope. What I have, Brandon left, is just the closing stuff. So I don't know if
that's what I got left too.
Yeah. Okay.
Let me go first.
You got it.
All right. So this is no pressure at all. These are easy questions, but I like to just ask random questions. First thing that comes to your mind, just blurt it out. Are you ready?
Yes.
Favorite Pop-Tart flavor?
Ooh, s'mores.
That's a good choice. All right. An artist or an album that you loved and listened to growing up?
Minutes to Midnight, Linkin Park.
Ooh, okay.
That's a good one.
Man, that's an interesting one, because usually I'd say like Hybrid Theory or what was the other one? Meteora.
But
Meteora. Man, he went, wow, that's interesting. Okay. I respect that. All right. I think we know this one, but I got to ask it. Favorite movie?
Lord of the Rings.
All right.
Sure. Yeah.
Fun fact, my dad took me to Twin Towers and we seen the midnight premiere, and I'll never forget it. About halfway through, he fell asleep. But I love him for taking, because he went for me. And you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that was real love.
Yeah.
I love Lord of the Rings too, by the way.
Yes.
Read all the books. The Hobbit's dope
Heck
too.
Yeah.
Next question. What helps inspire your creativity?
That's a good one. Seeing other people do what they love really is super inspiring to me. Like, no matter if it's like something that's creative or not, just seeing people get excited about life inspires me.
That's a genuine answer, and I believe him.
I got it.
All right, one more. Favorite video game? All time. It could be now. It could be back in the day.
Oh, that's true.
Anything.
I would have to say, I'll go back with the classic Call of Duty, because that's where it all started for me.
Okay.
So.
All right, so you're a first-person shooter guy?
Yeah, definitely. And then got super into RPGs.
Okay.
So.
All right. Did you ever play the Lord of the Rings games back in the day?
I did. Yep.
I thought they were pretty good for the time.
They were pretty good.
I remember I had on PS2.
I definitely got into them.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
All right, I actually got one more, because he said finance. My bad. I wrote so much down while he was just talking. You into stocks?
I am into stocks, yes.
Dude, I just got hip, and Shaw's been like putting me on to this and that. Apple and Tesla did the splits, and I'm like, this is my chance.
Yes.
All right,
yep.
so
it's been very interesting.
So, what any stocks you would recommend?
This is like a
I'll you're all good. I'll just be.
You can be
pretty
brief,
general.
yeah, general.
First off, I am not a financial advisor or whatever. I have to preface that. But a disclaimer. No, I think in general, just a lot of like tech-based stocks are always good to look at, like Apple, Microsoft, all the big names, Tesla, because I would consider them a software company over a car company.
Yeah.
But because those always have typical trends that you can follow pretty well. So,
dude,
that's good advice.
All right. Tech
Look at Brandon.
Hop on my Robinhood app and go into the tech department.
Oh my goodness gracious. Okay.
Go ahead, Shaw.
You got anything, Trav, before we wrap it up?
What do you shoot with mostly? Like, what's your favorite?
Yeah, definitely.
Gear?
So I love that question, because it always comes up. So I shoot mainly on Sony. Right now I own the Sony A7R4, which is the more photography based camera, and then I sold everything else that I used to shoot on, and I'm waiting for the A7S3, which is the newest like video centric Sony mirrorless camera to come out and ship to me.
Hell yeah.
But prior to that, I shot for the past 2 years on the Sony A7 III, and then my first camera, like this is just like for anybody listening, you don't have to have those fancy of cameras or pricey if you whatever your budget is. I bought a $350 used Panasonic G7 because I wanted to shoot 4K, because to me back then I was just like, I have to shoot 4K, and I didn't know why at the time, but I bought that camera to get started with, and I used that professionally for about 5 months before upgrading.
I love the G7s. There's actually 2 of them filming us right now.
Yes, they're awesome. They're awesome cameras. Yeah.
I'm definitely a Panasonic fan, but some Canon too. But I've never played with Sonys. But
Sony for me, it was mostly just because I'm a pretty minimal shooter. So like, and I shoot in low light a lot with concerts or any type of like live event, and that's what it was the best tool for the job. Cool. So
heck yeah. All right, Luke. Well, these
stick with Sony.
Oh my God!
Get my tips in.
Oh man.
These last couple questions are just really broad, and they're meant to, like, you can think on them. You don't have to just shoot an answer right away. So they're real three like kind of broad and open-ended questions. But the first one is, what's something that you're working on improving in your life right now? And it could be creative related. It could just be anything, but something that you're working on improving.
Yeah, definitely. I would say taking time for myself, because I know a lot of my life is revolved around getting better or like progressing towards my passion. And there's like a fine line between working on a passion and then actually taking time for yourself. So just finding a balance.
I could definitely use that advice. So thank you.
And it's hard. Right now. It's hard for sure. Yeah.
What does success look like for you right now? I think that sometimes what success looks like to us changes, like, as we experience different things.
Oh, it definitely does.
So what's that look like for you right now?
Right now, success is, in terms of career, success is doing something that you genuinely enjoy and be able to do your living with it, right? Mm-hmm. Instead of, I used to being the finance guy. When I first started working, it was all about numbers and how much money can I make. And there wasn't really much emotional meaning to me behind that. And so just working towards creating a life that you love.
That's awesome.
So
last one is, if you could give somebody, like a creator that's trying to get their brand or their business off the ground, they're just getting started, they're trying to build things, they don't really know what they're doing, if you could give them 1 or 2 pieces of advice based on what you've experienced and the things you've been through, what do you think that would be?
Just create. And I say just create because there's so many things that you can take a picture of the wall and it's a photo, right? But just continue to create, even if you don't have ideas, or if there's things that you're like, oh, this isn't perfect yet for the world, just put it out there and reiterate and start on the new project or new thing that is going to let you develop that craft even more. And then be yourself, because it's great to emulate others that you look up to and inspirations, because I definitely do, and I'm sure almost everybody does. But as you're finding your voice and as you're finding and understanding who you want to be in that world, just don't be afraid to be authentic and be yourself, because that's what's going to separate you from other people and get you to where you want to be.
Solid.
Be yourself, people. Be yourself.
Love it.
Be yourself.
Luke, this was an amazing episode. I hope that you guys as listeners took some notes, because I think Luke touched on a lot of really important things that could help you grow as a creator and just even help you as a person. So I want to thank you for your time, and you have an amazing story. We appreciate you sitting down and chopping it up with us. This is another episode of the Iron Skillet Podcast. We'll see you guys next week.
Whoop.